Hello, I'm here today to provide some historical context to the sororal relationships that we see in Pride and Prejudice. Since I don't have a lot of time, I'm going to talk briefly about sisterhood in three main ways: biography, royalty, and sisterly competition. My talk will primarily make connection to the Bennet sisters, but it is important to remember what the scholar Ruth Perry points out. The entire social fabric of Pride and Prejudice is constructed out of sister relationships. From the five Bennet sisters and Mr. Bingley's two sisters, Miss Bingley and Mrs. Hurst, to Mr. Bennet's sister, Mrs. Phillips, and her sister-in-law, Mrs. Gardiner. Although there are five Bennet sisters, I'd like to start off by thinking about pairs of sisters. We know from Jane Austen's own life that she had a fulfilling, lifelong relationship with her sister Cassandra. Jane was born almost 3 years after her elder sister, and as the fifth and seventh children in a household full of boys, the sisters were destined to be close from the start. George Austen, their father, wrote of Jane the day after her birth. "We have now another girl, a present plaything for her sister Cassie, and a future companion." The sisters grew up together at the Steventon Rectory, and according to family legend, Jane insisted on going away with Cassandra when it was time for her to begin her education. Their niece Anna Lefroy recalled about the sisters, "Their affection for each other was extreme. It passed the common love of sisters, and it had been so from childhood. My grandmother said, if Cassandra's head had been going to be cut off, Jane would have had hers cut off too." This affection was not just one-sided. Cassandra's letter to her niece Fanny after Jane's death speaks to the intensity of the sisters' relationship. "I have lost a treasure, such a friend, as never can have been surpassed. She was the sun of my life, the gilder of every pleasure, the soother of every sorrow. I had not a thought concealed from her, and it is as if I had lost a part of myself." With this model in mind, we can think about the relationship between the two eldest Bennet sisters, Jane and Lizzie. They appear close throughout the novel, but I urge you to think of any instances where the sisters may differ in opinion. Of course, Jane and Lizzie are not the only Bennet sisters. As a large group of only female children, the Bennet sisters are distinctive in their society in Meryton and in contemporary literature of the time. Yet, a large group of sisters was likely on the minds of all British men and women during the late Georgian and Regency eras due to the 6 daughters of George III and Queen Charlotte. The king and queen had 15 children in total. The daughters in particular were kept in the royal household for as long as possible. Because the daughters were not allowed to marry and leave their parents until their 30s and 40s, they produced no legitimate surviving children. The daughters responded differently to this extreme parental control. Only Charlotte, the firstborn, and Princess Royal had an official marriage at the relatively young age of 31. George III refused both offers of marriage that came to Augusta, the second eldest, so she began a relationship with an army officer at the age of 35 and privately married him 9 years later after seeking the permission of her brother, the Prince Regent. The third and fifth born princesses, Elizabeth and Sophia, though 7 years apart, rebelled against their parents' control in a more extreme manner. They both had children out of wedlock at their respective ages of 18 and 23. Neither of these children were ever acknowledged by the royal family. The fourth and sixth daughters tried for a more conservative route. Both princesses fell in love, but were forbidden to marry by their mother. Mary was held back by her mother's insistence on upholding the social practice of precedence. As none of Mary's elder sisters were married in 1796, she was forced to wait to marry the Dutch Prince Frederick, and unfortunately, he died before they were able to get married. The youngest Princess Amelia was also held back from marrying, but in this case, Queen Charlotte feared that the marriage of the youngest and most favored daughter would trigger one of George III's episodes of madness or porphyria. This spread of different reactions, from obedience to secret marriages to children out of wedlock, to the same family environment, follows well-known theories of personality spread among children. Elder siblings are more likely to emulate their parents and act conservatively in family life, as we see with Princess Charlotte's marriage, while younger siblings are more likely to rebel against the status quo. The Bennet sisters, too, have drastically different personalities. Kay Torney Souter describes them as older sibs who are conventional and cautious, the younger ones who are perceived as rebellious and inclined to take risks, and the younger child who is ignored and obliged to be satisfied with a family niche that nobody else has taken or wants. Now, after such a description, I would be remiss not to spend a moment on Mary Bennet and her relationship to her sisters. As you can see on your handout, in the quote from Pride and Prejudice, Mary is aware of her physical difference from her sisters and tries to overcome that difference with accomplishments. In the words of the historian Amanda Vickery, we can think of an accomplishment as a faculty attained by the study and practice that completed or perfected a person for society, adding delicacy of taste and elegance of manners to accuracy of knowledge and correctness of thought. Accomplishments typically included reading, writing, music, dancing, French, and more decorative arts like embroidery, needlework, paper cutting, waxwork, japanning, painting on glass, patchwork, shell work, moss work, and of course, feather work. Mary, despite being the most accomplished of her sisters, lacks the social graces or awareness to accompany her accomplishments. Mrs. Hester Chapone warns of such a faux pas in her conduct book, Letters on the Improvement of the Mind, addressed to a young lady, when she cautiously encourages her reader to pursue music. She writes, "I should be sorry to see you neglect a talent which will at least afford you an innocent amusement, though it should not enable you to give much pleasure to your friends." Poor Mary strives to make herself a better or at least equal player on the marriage market alongside her sisters, a move that is necessary due to all 5 Bennett sisters being out at once. Being out, or being officially introduced into society, allowed young women to be eligible for offers of marriage as they attended social activities and met potential suitors. The fact that all 5 Bennett sisters are out violates typical social practice, as Lady Catherine lets us know. One reason why this is so is because young women were to come out once their education was complete. Thomas Gisborne advised in another conduct manual, Inquiry into the Duties of the Female Sex, that young women be kept at home until their moral compass was strong. He wrote, "Let her not be distracted in the years by nature particularly designed for the cultivation of the understanding and the acquisition of knowledge by the turbulence and glare of polite amusements." As we know that the Bennett parents had a lax approach to education, we may question whether all the Bennett sisters have reached this standard, especially the younger ones, by the time they are out in society. So with this in mind, I want to leave you with a few questions to think about as we move forward. In rules of conduct, why might Austen have chosen to have all 5 Bennett sisters out at once? What does this add to the sisters' relationship? Why did Austen use sisterhood as an avenue to explore women's lives? And what does the sibling relationship offer to both authors and readers that other relationships, such as a romance or the relationship between a parent and a child, does not? Thank you.